off with professional wrestling, because we know how they try to kayfabe everything with professional wrestling and leave us in the dark with what's going to happen, because they want it to be just as much a shock to the fan as the entire wrestling world is always taken oblivious by what happens in professional wrestling, and they're always trying to throw us off. So they'll post this article or this photo or this video to get us thinking about what could be happening with individuals like The Undertaker, Triple H, Shawn Michaels, possible returns that could be happening. And I know everybody was extremely high on returns this year for the match between The Undertaker and Shane McMahon. So many people thought that people were going to be making appearances like Goldberg, Kurt Angle, Sting was another one. So many people had their thoughts and their predictions kind of really out there with the interferences on the behalf of Shane McMahon to help Shane McMahon defeat The Undertaker, because the odds were so astronomical of Shane McMahon actually winning the match without outside interference, and we didn't even see outside interference in this match after all the speculation that was made on who was going to return to help Shane McMahon win the match. I know everybody was extremely high on Goldberg. One that other people were really extremely high on was Kurt Angle. I was really kind of let down that we didn't see an interference, to be honest with you, because I thought that match looked so ridiculous on paper, and I was probably let down more than probably anyone going into the match between The Undertaker and Shane McMahon, because I was really high on Kurt Angle possibly returning to help the Shane McMahons of the world win this match and set up for, say, a rematch for the first time in 10 years between Kurt Angle and The Undertaker, because of just how much of a pure wrestling match it would have been. You know, if you think back on their previous match they had at No Way Out 2006, February of 2006, I mean, it was one of the best matches I had seen in a really long time. I remember watching that match and giving that match profound credit for being as good as what it was. I mean, Kurt Angle versus The Undertaker 10 years ago was awesome. Can you imagine the magnitude and the level this match would be at if it happened 10 years later in a rematch? I mean, we've waited forever to see a rematch between The Undertaker and Kurt Angle, so I was really let down, needless to say, that we didn't see Kurt Angle pull an interference on the behalf of Shane McMahon, and really any interference pulled on the behalf of Shane McMahon from his WCW era, buying that back in March of 2001 from underneath his father. And we really thought we were going to see something like a rebirth of the WCW era when Shane was the owner of World Championship Wrestling, and we were all really let down over the fact that it didn't happen. And I think that that really threw us off, you know, and that's just an example of how they can lead us in one direction, making us believe something that isn't actually what's going to happen. We all thought there was going to be an interference in the match, and we were kind of led astray, and there was no interference at all. The Undertaker just pretty much went in. He dominated a certain portion of the match, and the tombstone on the steps pretty much sealed the fate of Shane McMahon after taking a bump, after jumping off a cage to the height of a high school and crashing through the announcer table. I think it was the English announcer table. It wasn't the Spanish table that took the bump, but I remember The Undertaker moving out of the way. And usually that's what Shane has pretty much become infamous for in professional wrestling, is taking these incredible bumps. And once he takes that incredible bump, he pretty much sees his demise, and pretty much he sealed it with the jump off the top of the Hell in a Cell. He crashes through the table after The Undertaker moves out of the way, and that's pretty much what this match went down in history for being known as, the night that Shane McMahon took one of the biggest bumps of his career. But we've seen Shane take really leaps of death-defying moves by jumping off things like Titantrons, jumping off things like different things backstage. So we've pretty much known Shane for taking these bumps. So if it didn't come down to an interference in this match, it was pretty much going to come down to Shane McMahon taking one of those infamous bumps that we've known him taking for years. So we were pretty much let down with this match. But it was pretty good when you talk about it from a wrestling standpoint. You know, the wrestling in the match was pretty good for a match like The Undertaker versus Shane McMahon, which looked horrible on paper. I think it proved a lot of its critics wrong, because a lot of its critics were saying this match was going to be horrible. Even Bret Hart himself. I remember reading an article on different professional wrestling news websites where Bret Hart claimed that this was the worst card that he had seen in WrestleMania history, which even goes back as far as the times that Bret Hart were headlining WrestleMania with Shawn Michaels and Yokozuna and his own brother Owen Hart, which is a match that nobody really ever talks about, which was one of the best matches that ever kicked off a WrestleMania, celebrating its 10th anniversary back in 1994, March of that year. So I think that, you know, for Bret Hart to say that it was the worst WrestleMania card in history, and along with a lot of other legends who said pretty much the same thing, WrestleMania really had to prove a lot of people wrong. And I think that match with Shane McMahon and The Undertaker, even though it wasn't the best WrestleMania match we had seen in years, I think it went a long way in proving a lot of people wrong. And I think because of just how incredible that match was, nobody should be led astray, or nobody should think what's not going to happen here. And I think that people should believe that The Undertaker is going to be wrestling again next year against a better opponent than what they had this year, because I know it was said too that of all the opponents you could have had for The Undertaker this year to have at WrestleMania, the best you had is for The Undertaker, your top dog, to fight Shane McMahon, someone who we hadn't seen in years. I mean, I think the last time we saw Shane McMahon was, 2009, before his departure from World Wrestling Entertainment was announced, and he sold the stock and got out of the business. Now all of a sudden we're supposed to believe that Shane McMahon is back and rebought his stock from whoever he sold it to and given a new share with WWE. I mean, nobody is really going to buy into that. I think it had to do, too, with all the injuries that we had going into this year's WrestleMania. They knew that Randy Orton, John Cena, Seth Rollins were out this year for WrestleMania, so they either had to have The Undertaker face someone like Shane McMahon and have Shane McMahon be there. With no disrespect to Shane McMahon, though, I think the reaction he got was one of the biggest reactions that a return had received in a really long time. I think he got an even bigger reaction than what The Rock did in 2011, and we know the reaction The Rock received was absolutely off the charts and blown out of proportion, but I think Shane McMahon's reaction topped that. And I don't even think Shane McMahon knew that he was going to get the reaction that he got, which made it so much more cooler, seeing the reaction on Shane McMahon's face, the response from the fans, everybody thinking that it was awesome, and the chance that this is awesome couldn't have been more accurate and dead on, because it really was awesome seeing Shane McMahon come out and confront his sister and his father after the Legacy Award was supposed to have been presented to Stephanie, and then we go from that to hearing about Shane McMahon versus The Undertaker in a match that was nothing short of unprecedented. I mean, it was really unprecedented seeing and hearing about the match of Shane McMahon and The Undertaker, because the first thing that people said was this match was never going to get over. There was no way Shane had a chance of winning the match, and pretty much the prediction of The Undertaker winning fell through with. Everybody knew The Undertaker was going to win, especially with the stipulation of it being The Undertaker's last WrestleMania, possibly. And I think that's also what led a lot of people astray. Everybody thought that Shane McMahon was going to be the one to return to the throne and put The Undertaker out of his misery, and The Undertaker pretty much rose above all the adversity, all the hate, of course, that he was getting from fans as the heel, pretty much. But no matter how many times The Undertaker plays a heel, he always has his supporters out there. He always has his fans that never turn on him. And that endless amount of support that people have given The Undertaker pretty much led him to the victory and led him to the promised land against Shane McMahon, able to keep his career intact, which means we will see The Undertaker next year at WrestleMania. But who is his opponent going to be? And like I said, there is an endless amount of opportunity still out there for The Undertaker to create with someone either we've seen him create with in the past, which is always still a chance of happening. It'll always have a chance of happening, The Undertaker facing another legend or someone who The Undertaker has never had a chance to create with before. Yeah, The Undertaker versus Sting sounds cool, but matches like The Undertaker versus Kevin Owens sound just as cool, or even The Undertaker versus someone like Sami Zayn, who is really over with wrestling fans. And I'm not playing favorites with Canadian wrestlers like Zayn and Owens, even though they're from Canada, and I myself am residing from Canada. I'm not playing favorites with these Canadian wrestlers, because I do think this about Canadian wrestlers. I think they are way too much over with professional wrestling, and I think that pretty much they are overshadowing other wrestlers who deserve just as much chance and equal opportunities as what they do. I think they're given too much of the limelight, too much of the spotlight, and they're pretty much overkilled. I think they're overkilling people like Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, but even though they're overkilling them, if they're overkilling them, they should give them just as much of an equal opportunity to be in the main events with, other wrestlers as well. And I think The Undertaker still has just as much chance to create with as many people as the new talent they subdue amongst themselves. So I think there is something that can be done creatively with The Undertaker still. So to contemplate his retirement, don't you think that we're kind of just drawing our own conclusions too soon about The Undertaker when we don't really know what's going to be happening in the way of a creative direction for him, because there is still much of a chance out there for The Undertaker to create as there was probably 10 years ago. And yeah, The Undertaker's probably not as performing as good as what he was 10 years ago, but no one is going to argue the fact The Undertaker is performing at top level or not, because they know The Undertaker's performing at top level, especially if he's having one match every year, and that one match every year is always nominated for Match of the Year. That really says something about someone in their early 50s. I mean, if you're in your early 50s and you're still being nominated for Match of the Year every year for one match that you have, that goes a long way in saying how good of a performer you actually are, because if The Undertaker wasn't as good as what they say he is and what he says he is himself and claims in these promos, then he wouldn't be being nominated for Match of the Year when he has one match every year. I mean, you usually have to have about 50 top matches before one of the 50 matches out of the other 49 are nominated for Match of the Year. And The Undertaker has one match every year, and it's always nominated for Match of the Year. That Slammy The Undertaker seems to always be up for, or at least for the last 5 years. He's been nominated for it. So that's why I say The Undertaker still has just as much a chance of creating with so many wrestlers he's never before as he does facing another legend. Yeah, it would feel like deja vu for a lot of us if we heard about The Undertaker, say, facing Triple H or Shawn Michaels again, or someone like The Rock because we've seen it hundreds of times over the last 15 years. I mean, The Undertaker versus The Rock is, what, over 10 years in the making if it happens, and it's The Undertaker's final match. I remember so much speculation on who The Undertaker would face, and so many people thought it should be The Rock because of how entertaining The Rock was after his return in 2011. So many people were saying the dead man faces the one, with The Rock winning to become the one who ends The Undertaker's career, and that would really solidify and go a long way in cementing The Rock's legacy. But I don't think that's going to be happening. If it's anything, it's The Undertaker versus someone we've never seen before in the way of a legend, or some of the new talented wrestlers who could be up for facing The Undertaker, one who I'm extremely high on, although I don't want to play favorites with Canadian wrestlers because they're so overrated, is Kevin Owens, because you're not going to argue the success that Kevin Owens